Imagine you are Hikaru Nakamura, one of the best players in the world. You are playing in a tournament. It's a rapid tournament. Your opponent has come fully prepared. Not just the opening, but the complete game. It's a rapid game. You are taking 3 to 4 minutes in middle game, but your opponent is not spending even a second as he has completely prepared. Sounds amazing. And that's exactly what happened in the Tal Memorial 2018. The game was between Daniil Dubov, a top grandmaster from Russia, also has remained second of Magnus Carlsen in the World Championship match against Ian Nepomniachtchi, versus Hikaru Nakamura, well-renowned grandmaster, top streamer, top content creator. And here we go. If you really want to see the power of preparation, make sure to watch the complete game till the end. And let's begin. This is the highest preparation you have ever seen in the chess history. Let's begin. Daniil Dubov, playing with the white pieces, opened the game with 1c for the English opening. We have knight to f6 by Nakamura, knight to c3 by Daniil, e6, e4, striking in the center, and now Hikaru decides to strike in the center with d5. In those days, in 2018, this line was kind of trending at that time. So here, Daniil simply pushed the pawn to e5. Already for beginners, it looks a bit complex. Let me ease it out for you. If white takes the pawn on d5, if everything trades on d5, you will see white simply having an isolated pawn on d2, which is already bad thing for white, and black is already very happy. So that's why we have the move e5 by Daniil, and now we have the move d4, a counter attack on the knight on c3. If you go back with the knight after e5, it's already a bad thing, as a white can simply take on d5, strike with the pawn on d4. White is having a complete control in the center and also leading in development because of knight on c3, whereas black's knight is still back on g8. So d4 makes sense, counter-attacking the knight, and here Daniil decides to capture the knight on f6. D cross c3, and now b cross c3, capturing towards the center, which is a fundamental move. Hikaru Nakamura captures the pawn on f6 with the queen not breaking the pawn structure on the king side, and now Daniil Dubov plays a very natural move in the position, which is d4, taking control of the center. And here Nakamura decides to play the move e5. The idea of e5 is pretty simple. You are striking in the center. It looks like why black is not developing the pieces to castle up, because black is trying to keep maximum flexibility in the position, because black is not really sure where the minor pieces belongs for now. But after playing e5, you can already realize black is opening up the light square bishop. Black wants to take on d4, as if white captures with the c pawn, the bishop on f8 will simply jump on b4, giving a check. So e5 makes a lot of sense. After e5, we have knight to f3 by Daniil, simply developing the knight. If he takes, black is having a bad pawn structure, the king is getting checked, and black is pretty happy. If white tries to push the pawn, now you see the c5 square is a very weak square for white, and black can simply put the bishop on c5, and once again white is having double pawns on the c file, and black is already better. That's exactly why Daniil simply decides to develop the knight. And now we have the move knight to c6 by Nakamura, finally developing the knight, because after knight f3, Daniil Dubov is simply threatening to capture the pawn on e5. And in this position, pushing the pawn wouldn't be a great idea, attacking the knight, because after knight to g5, the pawn is simply attacked. And now if you try to defend the pawn with bishop f5, after queen e2, you will realize now there is no good way to defend the pawn. f3 is also coming up as the pawn is pinned, and white is already better. So that's why pushing the pawn would be a bad idea, as you are simply moving the same piece twice, not developing the minor pieces, which would be a very bad idea in the opening. So that's why knight to c6, Nakamura is also still prepared. And now we have the move bishop to e2 by Daniil Dubov. Now pushing the pawn on d5 still wouldn't be a great idea, as after simply e4, black is pushing up the pawn, doing a counter attack to the knight once again, and also using the queen on f6 to attack the pawn on c3, and black is already once again kind of equalized the position. So that's why bishop e2, simply developing the minor pieces, following the basics fundamentals of chess. And now we have the move e cross d4 by Nakamura. And here I believe Nakamura was pretending, or maybe guessing, that Dubov will simply take back the pawn on d4. He can finally develop the bishop to b4, giving a check. Bishop d2 takes, and after castle up, Black is pretty happy in this position. Castle has been done. The queen is nicely developed. Definitely white is having some center control, but at the same time the center pawns are weak. Black can play rook d8, putting pressure on the pawns. Bishop goes to g4. It's very easy to play with the black pieces. But what Nakamura missed, and it was all part of Daniil Dubov's preparation, he decided to play the move bishop to g5, first attacking the queen. The queen forced to go on g6, and now once again, now I believe still Nakamura, which is still the best move, is to capture the pawn on d4. And after bishop b4 check, I believe Nakamura was thinking that this would be exactly what Dubov will go for. But Daniil decides to play the move short castle. You see, this is the power of development. Daniil Dubov had decided to sacrifice one more pawn, just saving time. His plan is to play fast. Black's king is in the center. He has developed all his pieces, even castled up. So here Nakamura decides to go for a bit risky move, which is d cross c3, being a bit of a pawn grabber and capturing the pawn on c3. And now he's officially 2 pawns up. Here Daniil decides to play the move bishop to d3, attacking the queen on g6. And here Nakamura decides to play the move queen to d6. As you see, a natural move that comes in my mind is to play the move bishop f5, developing the bishop. But bishop f5 would be a big blunder, as after rook e1 check, a very simple looking move, the king is not really having anywhere to go. The bishop can't really go back because the queen would be hanging. So black is kind of forced to go on e7. And now just bishop e7, knight e7. And finally, white can play the move knight h4, as there is no bishop hanging on g5. So after knight h4, just a piece is going to fall up and white is completely winning. So that's why Nakamura decides to move the queen to d6. And now we have finally rook e1 check. And now we have bishop to e7. So bishop e7 is a very natural looking move. Black wants to castle up. I was thinking bishop e6, and I believe after bishop e6, white simply wants to play rook b1, getting all the pieces into the game. Even b7 is hanging up. Who knows, even rook b5 can be an idea at some points. Practically speaking, it looks like a very dangerous position for black. At the same time, though, it's an option to continue the game. Bishop e7 was played by Nakamura, and once again, Daniil Dubov instantly played the move c5. Another pawn sacrificed by Daniil Dubov. The idea is pretty simple actually, and very deep at the same time. After c5, he's trying to sacrifice another pawn in order to open up some diagonals, open up some files, and that's a crazy idea. We have queen cross c5. Nakamura is like, okay, you're giving me a pawn, I'll grab it, because Nakamura is not really having any option but to go for capturing the pawn on c5. And now Nakamura is officially 3 pawns up. Queen cross c5, and now we have the move bishop cross e7 by Daniil. Knight cross e7, and now rook to d4. Just centralizing the rook, attacking the queen. The queen goes back to d6, and now bishop to b5 check, not giving black a single chance. If we give black a single move, black would love to castle up, and then black is simply 3 pawns up, and that would be winning position for black. Daniil Dubov giving no time to Nakamura, bishop to b5 check. You have to move the king, or you can play the move bishop to d7. King to f8 was happened in the game. If Nakamura would have played the move bishop to d7, I believe Daniil simply can capture the bishop, takes, simply trade off the queen, and now rook to d1 check. If you go to c6 or c8, you lose the knight on e7. You have to fall back with your king to e8, but after rook e1, you still lose the knight on e7, and that's a completely losing position for black. So that's the very reason Nakamura decides to play the move king to f8. Once again, a best move in the position. Daniil Dubov is completely prepared, and Nakamura is trying to spend time on his clock, trying to find the best move. And what's amazing is Nakamura is finding the best move, and that is actually making Daniil Dubov's work much easier, as he has saw the best line with the help of the engine, and that same best line Nakamura is finding on the board. After king f8, we have the move queen to e2 by Daniil Dubov, as black king cannot really castle up. An idea is simply rook d1, getting completely rook into the game, and that's game over. So Nakamura once again found the best move in the position f6, attacking the rook, and also making a square for the king to go on f7. Daniil Dubov decides to play the move rook to d1, getting all the pieces into the game, and finally Nakamura decides to sack the queen with f cross e5. Nakamura's idea here is if Dubov captures the queen, he's simply going to capture it back, and now he's having two rooks for the queen, and also a 3 pawns advantage. Still, the possession is even, but this is the possession Nakamura is aiming for. Daniil Dubov is like, who needs the queen when you can get the pawn? Knight cross e5. Once again, the best move in the possession, and that's a simply phenomenal move. The idea of knight e5 is pretty simple. If you move the queen, you're getting checkmate in one move, as the f7 square is already covered by the knight. You can't move the queen. So Nakamura decides to find the best move once again in the possession, bishop to f5. You see, finally Dubov decided to capture the queen because now Nakamura can move the queen as the d8 square is covered by the rook. So rook d6, cd6, and now we have the move knight to d7 check. By the way, Daniil Dubov is still in his preparation, which is amazing. After knight d7 check, we have the move king to f7 by Nakamura. If black decides to capture the knight, which looks like an option, white can simply capture it back with the bishop, knight to c6, because now white is preparing to play the move queen to f3 check, king g8, and bishop e6 would be a checkmate. You have to move the knight to make some space for the king. But after a check, king goes to e7, Dubov can play the move queen to g4, which is once again an amazing move in the position, threatening there are two ideas, queen g7 and winning the rook, and queen e6 at the same time. You have to move the rook from the h8 square, and now just capturing the knight, capturing the pawn on g7, and finally capturing the pawn on c3. Material wise, you can see both the sides are having equal pawns. White is having a queen and black is having two rooks. The position should be equal, but I would love to play with the white pieces, as black's pawn structure is a bit scattered up. I can easily collect some pawns, and I'm having 3 versus 1 majority on the king side. I can easily run down my pawns on the king side, and I would personally like to play with the white pieces in this position. But Nakamura once again found the best move in the position, king to f7. We have queen to c4 check by Daniil Dubov. Once again the best move as he is still in his preparation. Bishop goes to e6, queen to f4 check, knight goes to f5, and now Daniil Dubov decides to push his g-pawn to g4, attacking the knight on f5. And after g4, finally, after 25 of moves, playing the best move by both the players, Nakamura finally cracked in this position, as he was like minutes, like 2 to 3 minutes on his clock, whereas Dubov is still having 22 minutes on his clock. So the game was started, both the players having 25 minutes on their clock. After g4, Nakamura decides to play the move rook a to d8. Finally, the blunder in the possession. I would say Daniil Dubov put so much pressure on Nakamura, it's already very hard to find the best continuation with the black pieces. If you want to find the best continuation, you can pause the video and try to find the best continuation. I'm going to reveal the answer in 3, 2, 1, and here we go. The best move in this position would have been to play the move c2. And that's a very surprising and a very the best move in the position, because after c2, once white captures the knight on f5, we are going to simply capture the knight on d7, bishop d7, and now finding a very subtle move in the position, which is getting the h rook to c8. H rook to c8 is the best move. Rook a c8 would be a blunder. You see, we are simply threatening to make a queen. White have to capture the rook. White can play the move bishop e6 check, but after king e7, queen g5 check, king f8, there are no more checks available. White have to go drop back with the queen, but simply rook c5 here, with the idea of getting the rook on c8, pushing the pawns on the queen side. And you see, in this position, white can't really move the queen because black will simply make one more queen. So practically speaking, I believe black should be winning in this position, despite engines saying it's an equal position. Going back a bit, in this position, white have to capture the rook c8, queen c1, and simply b5 with the idea of pushing the pawns on the queen side. The queen can't really be moved up. Black is completely winning. And in this position, after takes, bishop d7 takes, if black tries to get his a rook into the game, it would be a big blunder, because after bishop e6 check now, king e7, queen g5 check. Once the king move, you see now the rook is not really defending the rook anymore, so white can simply capture the rook, and now the queen on g5 is simply defending the c1 square, so white is completely winning. So that's the reason c2 would have been the best move in this position by Nakamura, but as he was only having 2 to 3 minutes on his clock, he finally cracked in the position. He played the move rook a to d8, capturing the knight. Makes sense. His idea is pretty clear. If bishop captures, rook captures, and now black is better. Material wise, the position is even, but positionally, black is completely losing now. We have bishop to c4 check, once again instantly played by Dubov, and now we have the move d5 by Hikaru Nakamura. I was thinking king e8, but king e8 is also losing. It's a mate in 6. Queen e3 check, the king is forced to go on f8, and now f6, a very strong move. If you take, I'm having queen h6 check, followed by queen g7, and that would be a mate. Black can play rook e8, but still f to g7 check, king g7, queen g5 check, king goes to f8, queen f6, and that would be a checkmate. So that's why going back in this position, Nakamura decides to sack a pawn and played the move king to f6. And now finally, after 29 moves, Dubov finally paused and spent some time on his clock, around 8 minutes. And now finally, after spending 8 minutes, Dubov found a kind of a winning sequence for him. Queen to d6 check. Now Nakamura decides to capture the pawn on f5. Bishop goes to c4. Amazing move by Dubov. Daniil, his idea is pretty clear. Bishop to d3 check, and black is not really having any more squares available but to come outside in the position where the king would be the most exposed piece in the position. Rook goes to e8. Nakamura trying to get all his pieces into the game somehow. Bishop goes to d3 check. The king goes to g5, and now h4 check by Dubov. Daniil, the best move in the position. You are giving a check. Black is having two options. Black in the game we had king h5. If black would have captured the pawn, queen g3 check, king h5, and after f4 it's a forced checkmate on g5. You can't really protect it, as after bishop g6 the king is still getting checkmated. So Nakamura decides to play the move king h5, but now we have the move queen to g3, once again threatening a mate in 1. We have bishop to g4 by Nakamura, stopping queen g5, and now f3 by Dubov. Daniil, once again threatening queen g4, king h6, and queen g5. That would be a mate. So we have rook to d4 by Nakamura. If f cross g4, rook cross g4 would be a counter attack, and black would be completely winning suddenly. So after rook to d4, you still can't really capture the bishop, as it would be a two move mate. So rook to d4, and now we have the move king to f2. Simple move by Dubov. Daniil, but a class move in this position, just moving the king with the threat of capturing the bishop. We have the move c2 by Nakamura, but simply bishop cross c2, as nothing is happening. If rook to d2 check, just king f1, there are no more checks available. Still I'm threatening mate in 2, and white would be completely winning. So Nakamura decides to play the move rook to f8, and the moment he played the move rook f8, he decided to resign the game. Why? Because just queen e5 check, and white can simply pick the rook on d4. So that's the reason black would be just completely a rook versus queen. The king is completely exposed, and the game is over. So that's the reason Nakamura, after playing the move rook f8 by himself, he decided to resign the game. This is a class preparation displayed by Dubov. Daniil, and what made it easy for him to follow his preparation was Nakamura finding the best move in the position, best move till the move number 25, finding all the best moves by both the players. But the difference is Dubov was completely in his preparation, has done his homework at his home, whereas Nakamura was simply struggling to find each and every move, burning time on the clock, finding the best move in the position. But after coming down to very low on time, around 2 to 3 minutes, he finally cracked under pressure, which is very obvious for humans. But still, a very good game played by Hikaru Nakamura. But Daniil Dubov showed how preparation can lead to some wonderful results. That is exactly, this is one of the best preparation I have ever seen in the world, in the world of chess, in the history of chess. So guys, always remember, if you are playing in a tournament, preparation does make a huge difference. If you are very well prepared, in the very top levels, players are trying their best to prepare as hard as possible, because in the long run you are having the benefit because you have worked hard in your preparations, and definitely it will help you to get some good results. So this was the complete game analysis of Daniil Dubov versus Hikaru Nakamura from the Tal Memorial 2018. I hope this video helped you. The analysis would have definitely helped you, and you can also play the same English opening, the same sequence that Daniil Dubov played in his game. So yeah, this was the game. I hope you guys have enjoyed it. If you did, make sure to like, share, and smash that subscribe button. I'm going to see you in the next one. Thank you for watching, and bye bye.